Good morning. I'm Mark Allen with Gaper.io, and I'm here today with Johan Anderson, the VP of Infrastructure and Reliability at DataDog. Good afternoon in your case, Johan. How you doing?
Very well. How are you, Mark?
I'm doing well. Thanks for joining us today. So to start with, can you just share a brief background of yourself and your work experience?
Sure. I started off out of college doing IT security work for a large Wall Street bank. I did that for about 5 years and spent a bunch of time learning to partner effectively with software engineers. And then I made the transition to working in site reliability engineering at Google. I worked there for a really long time on a variety of product and infrastructure pieces, moving up through management to run eventually an org of about 40 across several teams. Before I left at my 10-year anniversary to work at a New York hedge fund, building site reliability engineering around the world for them. But then I got an opportunity from DataDog to come head up their infrastructure and reliability team in last August or so, so about 6 months ago at this point, which I happily took as a great chance to get on with a company that is building a lot of new and exciting stuff and kind of raise the game as they start growing incredibly rapidly. And I've been there ever since.
Wow. So approximately 6 months at DataDog. Does that sound right?
Yep, that's about where I'm at.
All right, good. So tell us about DataDog. I've heard of them. I know basically what they do, but tell us what you do and who your typical product is or your typical customer, things like that.
So DataDog is a software as a service monitoring company. We give customers APIs or agents that they can run on their hosts to gather data from a variety of sources, whether it's integrations with third-party software like databases or Kafka or your web services or what have you, or just kind of integrations that you write in first-party software so that you can export counters and gauges and histograms of what your application is doing. And then we run the back end for this, which gathers, aggregates, and stores them for you and provides you with a really beautiful web-based front end for doing consoles, dashboards, alerting, and other management utilities. We have a variety of products that basically advance this mission, but the goal is to make your infrastructure and application as transparent and provide you a single pane of glass to kind of get that insight into it as possible.
Oh, very cool. So is it like a proactive measuring tool for development organizations and for IT operations so that they can start to see trends? And then when something does break, they can see exactly where it broke?
Exactly. And honestly, it's a unification of the two, right? So it can be really useful to an application developer to see, I was receiving much more traffic than usual. And look, the host itself reports a higher load or reduced memory resources or higher IO bandwidth. So really providing people a single pane of glass to see both those metrics together and then to kind of report on their correlations is something that DataDog really adds over some of the legacy observability tools in the space.
Interesting. So now we're going to talk about remote work and remote development. So what has been your experience with that before DataDog? Obviously, since DataDog, you've been working remotely since it's only 6 months. So Can you tell us what it was like and what it's like now and like compare the two?
Sure. So I'll talk about like at Google and at the hedge fund I worked at, the remote work was largely viewed as the exception. There was a heavy emphasis on the benefit of close collaboration and these open plan offices where teams sat huddled together and teams could walk by and have impromptu conversations, design sessions, debugging sessions was really a highly valuable thing. It was something they really valued and tried to build around. Everyone believed in the importance of remote work as a possibility for things like disaster recovery, for just employee satisfaction, right? You know, you've got a delivery coming or the cable guy is arriving between 8 a.m. and 2 p.m. You know, it's much easier to be able to work at home, even if maybe you're less effective than what you were sitting with your team, or at least that was the perception, right? And then really since the lockdown started, I think that perception pivoted first by necessity, just people can't come to the office. And then with the growing recognition that with kind of sets of modern tools, it was possible for people to retain the vast majority of effectiveness while working remotely. Tools like Slack and Google Docs and Zoom and stuff, you know, were not people's first choice, but some of that appears to be kind of early adopters anxiety, right? As people got more comfortable with it, as it became more fluent, it became more natural. I can't say I've reached the point where I'll say that, no, there's no value in offices at all anymore. They will never exist again. But it certainly has gone to demonstrate that a lot of the prior attitudes, that it's impossible to run a team that works remotely effectively, or you'll always have lower velocity or more difficult management problems in remote work. It's made people really question those things that used to be assumptions.
No, I agree with you. I think at first people panicked, and the first month or two,
Yep.
it was like, but then I think people settled into and like, hey, this isn't so bad. Especially without having to commute into a big city.
Oh. Yeah, no, and the ability to kind of to do it successfully, I think you need to be able to have the ability to draw boundaries at home, like the ability to say, okay, Mark, we're done for the day. Have a great afternoon. And 30 seconds later, I can be playing with my kids is a really great a great thing to do. The flip side of that coin, though, is that if you page me 20 minutes later, it's also 30 seconds to just go back in and say, okay, I'll be out in another hour or two because work is just sitting right here. So I think we've learned that technology is stronger than we thought it was for enabling the stuff. We're still working on developing the right culture and practices around it to avoid it burning people out. I mean, I've had people on my team who tell me their entire day is spent going from Zoom to Zoom to Zoom to Zoom, just sitting in front of a screen the whole time, and that it's stressful. It burns them out. And I try and coach them that, like, look, you have to be able to disconnect. It's more important now than ever. Even if you can't go anywhere, you can't go out to dinner with your family, or you can't, maybe go out to a sporting event or a movie, you still need to figure out how to disconnect and take time for you. And for a lot of high performing engineers, that can be a tough message to hear, this "you must disconnect" message. I don't know.
You're right, because I know many engineers that work all kinds of weird hours, and I'd get emails from them at 2 a.m. when something popped into their head and they fixed it.
Yeah. I mean, and as a manager or a person leading an org like this, I'm trying to, I'll be up at weird hours. My kids will wake me up, or I'll have something that I want to do. But I try very hard not to kind of send those messages at 2 a.m, because it starts leading people to have the expectation that, oh, he sent it then, he probably wants an answer. I better, as soon as I get that email, jump out of bed. No, let's not be crazy here. Let's try and adhere to some semblance of sanity. Because especially when people don't have anywhere else they can go, it gets almost more important to be able to carve out boundaries between what is your work and what is your home time.
Yeah, especially when your office and your home are the same place. So yeah. Interestingly, you started during the pandemic, so you haven't really gone into the office. How hard was it for you personally to be onboarded? And now that you've actually have hired people, how hard is it to onboard them?
So I guess there are kind of two classes of challenges here. And one is kind of the logistics, right? Like, how did you get a computer? How did you get your account set up? How did you get an ID? All of this stuff. And I think DataDog at least has done a really excellent job at like conquering the logistical challenges. They shipped me a pre-configured laptop. They set a budget for home office equipment that you could just expense and send the receipts in for. They made it really easy to kind of get up to speed. But then the second half of that is, then how do you become effective in your organization? And this is kind of where the challenges lie. As somebody who's hiring and trying to develop staff pretty heavily during pandemic, it's become more important to me to kind of, people talk about, oh, well, I'll assign you a mentor when you get hired, or I'll assign you a buddy on your team or somebody off your team. This has become a much more serious obligation in an era where if you don't know how to fix something, you can easily just sit here staring at your computer all by yourself for many hours before somebody will notice you. So emphasizing the importance to people of, it's no shame to go and ask for help. Your whole team is here. There's a reason we hire teams to manage things. It's because we want you to collaborate together and make each other more effective. Training people about that has been really important. Finding time in your day to carve out to just have one call like this, right? So that it's not just text in a chat client or text in an email, but there's a real human physical face to look at. It feels kind of touchy-feely. Oh, this isn't the work. I don't want to talk to you about my personal stuff. we kind of have to do it. And I'm
Yeah.
trying to emphasize the importance to people that it's a real obligation. And then kind of DataDog at least has two primary engineering centers even from before the pandemic, one in Europe and one in New York in the US. So they already had a really healthy culture of kind of remote connectivity, of discussing things in discoverable places, right? If you have a team that is split between Paris and New York, and the Paris half hears that the New York side has decided to do something and started without ever bringing it up, that stirs resentment. That stirs kind of, I am out of the loop, I'm not in touch, I am not important. DataDog, before the pandemic even started, already had to be dealing with these problems and has a pretty healthy design doc-driven culture that has a pretty heavy Slack presence and a very healthy, we sync up often and we trust each other dynamic. I wish I could claim credit that I just came in and set it up, but in 6 months that would be ambitious. But I will say I recognize it as really valuable, and it's made the transition here easier than I feared it would be when I was switching jobs during the lockdown, you know?
Yeah, I would imagine. Just out of curiosity, does DataDog or your department in DataDog, do you do virtual happy hours?
We do a variety of virtual events. So we've done kind of remote trivia, we've done remote games, we've done kind of after work get-togethers and sit-downs. One of the interesting things about being in infrastructure is that there's this perception that, you know, you hear it even in the vocabulary. We're looking to hire rock stars. We're looking for hard charging people that can lead to a certain class of culture that is focused on, let's just go get drinks over work after work and hash it out over there. And I'm the last person to throw rocks at that, right? I like having those relationships with my team. But if you're someone like a new parent or someone who's going to school after work or whatever, that can feel really disconnecting. So while I'm not giving up on happy hours and we have them, I also try and emphasize that there are other places where you can get those kind of connections. We'll do postmortem reviews for afternoon tea, for example, where we can sit down and talk about more recent disasters and what we learned from them. But not everything should involve and then after your day job, stay another 2 hours talking about work with your coworkers, just because I think that that's culturally limiting and it can lead to people who are otherwise excellent coworkers feeling cut off and out of touch. Yeah. I may have kind of gone off on a rant there. I apologize if that's what I wanted to talk about.
One final question is, what do you think is going to be the future of remote employment, both at DataDog and in general?
I mean, it'll be interesting, right? DataDog, just by necessity for the growth rate that it's seeing, has to grow really heavily now. And with people not able to come to the office anyway, it's been much easier to find strong talent in places that are not kind of stereotypical major tech metropolises, right? So we've moved from a very heavy nucleus to a smaller nucleus with a halo of distributed engineers in travel distance around it. And we've started kind of going even beyond that with engineers now in the Midwest or you know, the South that we don't have plans for them to come back to the office. I think that as we move forward, we still see value in having a place to call home, a center to be in, but I think we're going to continue developing practices and tools that make it possible to be effective if you aren't there. Does that mean maybe, you know, we won't buy a whole office building for ourselves as we grow? We probably won't. That probably won't happen. But on the other hand, will we go 100% virtual and just, okay, I'll only ever sit in this box in my basement talking to you over a screen? I'm not ready to commit to that yet. You know, one bad winter, another resurgence like this, and you could see life ending up that way. But I don't think we've reached that point yet.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, Johan, I want to thank you for your time today. Good luck with DataDog. It sounds like you guys are on a genuine upward path. I think you're going to be a busy man. Good luck and have a great 2021.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for your time. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.